Well, I often work in very working class themes and people, and my father was a tugboat guy. My Polish grandmother skinned tomatoes on the Boston Street waterfront during the Depression. My Polish grandfather worked at National Brewery. My Spanish grandfather was a shipyard worker. I grew up surrounded by characters, and I like to memorialize them in my fiction. And one of the worst criticisms you could get growing up in those old neighborhoods before they were gentrified was if someone called you a goof. If you were a goof, you were finished. Like, he's a goof, which meant you didn't want him to be on your, on your crew when you were working. A goof could get you killed. A goof is someone who didn't pay attention, who was a daydreamer. I mean, because of my love of, because I would much rather, as a kid, read the encyclopedia than help, around the house. I walked treacherously close to being a borderline goof. Luckily, I was able to make something of it. And this story memorializes one of those people, and it's called Granada in the Drink. And it begins with a quote. "Just because wisdom comes from an ancient well doesn't mean you replace it with indoor plumbing." Pio Tali was walking fast through Patterson Park, trying to get home before swift, dark clouds delivered a summer thunderstorm. He spotted Faluch in a crowd by the boat lake, and he started walking faster. But Faluch said, "Pio, hey, P." The city had drained the lake for repairs and found a car on the bottom. When the car was pulled up from the Patterson Park boat lake, the trunk popped open, and in the truck a body, both pretzel and raisin. Pio nodded without breaking stride, and Faluch grabbed his arm. "You're not going to believe this one." For the love of Christ, thought Pio. Faluch Rosario was a bore on mundane subjects like the weather. Cats and dogs, pal. It's going to come down cats and dogs. On baseball, those bums might never win another game for as long as we live. And when he told you the time of the day, that it was later than you think. When there was real news, like the discovery of a brand new Ford Granada sunk in the muck of the Patterson Park boat lake with a body in the trunk, well, then the old barber was just insufferable. The lake bed was foul in the August heat, and the winds of the coming storm carried the stench into open windows of row houses ringing the park, windows closing one by one as black clouds rolled in from the harbor. And Faluch leaned in, his breath atrocious. "It's my sister's car. Missing since the day she drove it home, remember?" Antoinette Tukulski had driven her 1977 powder blue Granada with power windows and 8-track stereo. The salesman threw in an Al Martino tape to close the deal. She'd driven it home 15 years ago from the dealer, bought it with money her husband didn't know about, and it disappeared that very night. And while the police looked for it, they didn't look too hard, and it wouldn't have mattered if they did. Pio would never forget how Faluch's sister Antoinette would disappear when they were playing tin can and red line and stickball in the street, and some boys would follow her, and how she let them touch her in Chink Alley for loose change. The alley was a short stretch of cobblestone off the corner of East Pratt and Chapel Streets, not far from where Faluch now had Pio trapped. Its spooky legends prompted all manners of dares and childish bravery, simply because a Chinese family, the only one in a neighborhood of Italians and Poles and Germans and hillbillies, a clan seemingly composed entirely of old people, a Chinese family lived at the end of that narrow lane, and that's how the lane got its name. The family sat in the big front window and emptied stew pots of boiling water into the gutter. Big kids told little kids that the oldest of them was way more than 100 and kept a meat cleaver up his sleeve. Everybody ran through that alley as fast as they could, some with their eyes shut and some collecting nickel bets. But Antoinette and her full and getting fuller 12-year-old breasts stood still and made dimes, quarters if you wanted to go below the equator. Pio had followed her into the alley more than once, the memories both thrilling and shameful enough that 50 years later he went out of his way to attend her funeral. That was a long time ago, Pio said, staring beyond Faluch to a man perspiring in a brown suit. He looked like a failed salesman, sweat dripping from his brow to a notebook, shaking his pen and wiping the page. "Police," said Faluch. "They're looking for my nephew." "Which one?" Like most everyone who dealt with Faluch, from his dead wife to whom he spoke every morning to 3 generations of men who'd sat in his barber chair, Pio wasn't listening. Back when they were both working and business was slow, Pio would see Faluch crossing Eastern Avenue toward his watch repair shop and groan, praying that a customer or the mailman or even a loser hustling broken vacuum cleaners would come by so he could excuse himself. "The son of my sister who owned the car," said Faluch, perturbed. "Tookie, the one on dope?" "He straightened himself out," said Faluch. Pio turned to go and Faluch grabbed his arm. He was always touching people, hand on the shoulder, holding a shake too long, as though he couldn't speak unless his hands were on you. "You want to know what was in the trunk?" "Sure," said Pio. "They don't know," said Faluch. And that was why Pio Tali, grandson of the man who had built the great Bolwicki Depression clock, a timepiece that reminded people not that it was later than they thought, but that there was still time if you hurried. That's why Pio ignored Faluch as often as he could, because Faluch was a goof. Yet today, the gods had ordained that the Orioles would lose another game. Faluch's nephew would not escape before the cops showed up, and cats and dogs did fall from the sky in numbers not seen in a century. "Gotta go," said Pio, pushing past, and sure to be late for dinner, his wife hurrying a half-mile away to bring in wash from the line, talking to herself with a clothespin between her lips. "What the hell does he do all day?" she said, forgetting to turn down the flame beneath the skillet before running out to grab the clothes, the first drop of rain splashing her forehead. "He runs the streets all day like he was a kid." Before Faluch could grab Pio again, a reporter shoved a microphone in the barber's face, and the watchmaker was able to escape, jogging past a stone wall carved with the head of a bull, water spouting from his flared snout. Faluch spoke before the reporter could ask a question. They got water ballet up at the pool later on." "What?" "It might be a good story for you. Water ballet up at the Patterson Park pool." "Sir, the police are saying you know who the car belongs to." "It's my sister's." "What's her name?" "She's dead." "Did you recognize the body in the trunk?" "There was nothing left to recognize." 2 more TV trucks pulled up in time to film the coroner's staff shake the body into a plastic bag, and then, kaboom, cameramen hit the ground and turned their lenses on Eastern Avenue. The street had exploded with a water main break. A sinkhole opened in the asphalt. Cars parked on both sides began floating away. Pio saw an old woman with a shopping bag in each hand swept down the gutter. Water shot 30 feet into the air, a geyser in the city, at the same moment that the sky split open. Screams and sirens, roofs leaking, basements flooding, kids laughing, water going up and water coming down in equal measure at the corner of Eastern and Montford on a late summer day deep in the bleeding heart of the Holy Land. "Thar she blows," cried Faluch. Half the crowd ran away from the gushing main, and the other half ran toward it. The Granada crime scene abandoned in the chaos, and Faluch was able to corral Pio one last time. The coroner's crew hurried the gurney over the soggy lawn, their shoes sinking into the mud up to the ankle. Police blocked off Eastern Avenue, directing traffic into the neighborhood. Cars backed up at every stop sign, windshield wipers useless. It would take the Orioles an extra 3 hours to lose that night because of the rain delay. And because the storm had bypassed the county south of town, Tookie Tukolsky didn't need an umbrella to slide into the back of a police cruiser when they pulled up to his house. A few blocks on the avenue, the great Bolwicki Depression clock told, "It's not too late to play your ace." And Faluch took that moment to ask his old friend, "Do you think I'm a good person?" Rain spilled off the old barber's Roman nose like a water slide. Are you a good person? Yeah. Grabbing a cop's gun and shooting Faluch would be too easy. Pio wanted to get his hands around his throat. Stunned, rain soaking them as sure as the poor soul in the Granada was drenched to the bone, Pio stared into the simpleton's eyes. He remembered that Faluch knew what his sister was up to in the alley when they were kids, and he knew that she gave the money to Faluch, who gave it to his father, saying that he'd earned it doing odd jobs. In the dark circles beneath Faluch's eyes, he saw Antoinette beyond the alley, graduating from quarters to dollars, many hundreds of dollars downtown on the block, until a stevedore named Tukolsky proposed, and they moved way out to Elk Ridge, where no one knew them. Soaked to his balls, Pio screamed into the roar of the storm, "What kind of stupid is that?" And Faluch looked Pio straight in the eye and said, "I know who's in that trunk. I know everything." Thank you.